What if everything you've been told about being a good person is a lie? We grow up believing that goodness is supposed to be rewarded, that kindness will bring us love, that selflessness will lead to happiness. But life doesn't work that way. In fact, it often seems like the opposite is true. The most self-sacrificing people are the ones who get used. The most honest people are the ones who get betrayed. The most forgiving people are the ones who get hurt the most. And the question is why? Why do those who try to do the right thing often end up suffering more than those who don't? Nietzsche saw this contradiction clearly. He didn't just accept the idea that good people suffer, he wanted to know why. And what he discovered was something most people don't want to hear: suffering isn't a mistake. It isn't some cosmic injustice. It isn't a punishment for being too kind, too trusting, too idealistic. It's the natural consequence of weakness. And weakness isn't about being physically frail or lacking intelligence. It's about how you see yourself, how you move through the world, how you respond to the forces that try to break you. Because here's the truth: most people who suffer do so because they refuse to embrace their own strength.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Kindness without strength is self-destruction. Forgiveness without boundaries is self-betrayal. Love without self-respect is slavery. The world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards power. And power isn't about control or domination. It's about refusing to let the world crush you, refusing to be naive, refusing to believe that being good means letting yourself be walked on. Nietzsche believed that most people suffer because they cling to an outdated morality, a morality that was designed not to elevate them but to keep them small, to make them obedient, to turn them into people who are easy to control. He called this slave morality a system of values that teaches people to be weak and then convinces them that their weakness is virtuous. Think about it. How many times have you been told that you should always be nice, even to those who hurt you? That you should always forgive, even when someone hasn't changed? That you should always give, even when you have nothing left? These ideas don't come from people who want you to be strong. They come from people who benefit from your weakness. And if you don't wake up to that fact, you will suffer for the rest of your life, not because you are good, but because you refuse to see the world as it really is. So the real question isn't why good people suffer. It's why so many people refuse to stop suffering. Most people don't suffer because they are good. They suffer because they refuse to change. They hold on to beliefs that don't serve them, relationships that drain them, and habits that keep them weak. And the worst part, they justify it. They tell themselves that enduring pain makes them noble, that suffering in silence makes them strong, that sacrificing themselves for others makes them good. But that's the biggest lie of all. Nietzsche believed that suffering isn't something to be endured, it's something to be learned from. Pain is a message, a signal that something is wrong, that something needs to change. But instead of listening, most people ignore it. They convince themselves that if they just hold on a little longer, if they just give a little more, if they just love a little harder, things will get better. But they won't. Because the truth is, suffering doesn't stop when you endure it. It stops when you refuse to tolerate it any longer. It stops when you recognize that being good does not mean being weak. It stops when you understand that kindness without strength is like a house without walls. It will collapse the moment it meets resistance. Good people suffer because they refuse to set boundaries, because they believe that saying no makes them selfish, because they think that walking away from people who hurt them means they are giving up. But But what if that's not true? What if real goodness, the kind that doesn't break you, requires the courage to protect yourself? What if the only way to truly be good is to stop letting people take advantage of you? Nietzsche believed that the highest form of morality isn't blind self-sacrifice, it's self-overcoming. It's the ability to take control of your own destiny, to shape yourself into someone who is not just kind, but powerful. Because power isn't evil. Power is the ability to act, to change, to refuse to be a victim. And the moment you stop seeing power as something bad, the moment you stop believing that strength and goodness are opposites, everything changes. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop feeling guilty for putting yourself first. You stop waiting for the world to reward you for being good and start creating a life where you don't need to suffer to prove your worth. So the real question isn't why good people suffer. It's why so many people would rather suffer than change. Change is terrifying, and that's why most people avoid it. They would rather suffer in familiar ways than risk the unknown. They would rather convince themselves that their pain has meaning than accept that they have the power to end it. But here's the truth: if your goodness constantly leads to suffering, then it's not real goodness. It's self-neglect disguised as virtue. Nietzsche didn't believe in blind morality. He believed in strength, in self-mastery, in the courage to evolve beyond the values that keep people weak. And that's exactly what most people refuse to do. They cling to the idea that suffering is noble because it allows them to avoid responsibility. It gives them an excuse to stay the same, to keep making the same mistakes, to blame the world instead of confronting the fact that they are choosing their own pain. But suffering is a choice. Not the pain itself. Life will always bring struggle, betrayal, loss. But how long you stay in that pain, that's up to you. Some people break and never recover. Others use their suffering as fuel, as proof that they deserve better, as a reason to become stronger, sharper, unstoppable. And that's the difference between those who are destroyed by life and those who rise above it. The ones who suffer the most are not the ones who have had the hardest lives. They are the ones who refuse to let go of their old selves, the ones who would rather be seen as good than be truly free. So what does it mean to be free? It means you stop expecting life to be fair. You stop waiting for people to appreciate your kindness. You stop thinking that if you just suffer long enough, someone will come along and save you. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to reward you for your sacrifices. No one is going to give you the life you deserve unless you take it for yourself. And that means becoming the kind of person who is both good and powerful, both kind and unbreakable, both compassionate and completely unwilling to tolerate anything that drains your soul. Nietzsche didn't believe in victims. He believed in transformation. He believed that suffering is not something to be endured, it is something to be overcome. And the moment you stop seeing yourself as someone who must suffer for their goodness, the moment you stop believing that pain makes you virtuous, everything changes. You stop being easy to manipulate. You stop allowing toxic people to feed off your kindness. You stop giving endless chances to those who have already shown you who they are. You stop being afraid of what will happen if you stand up for yourself, if you demand more, if you finally decide that you are done suffering for things that are no longer worth your energy. So the real question isn't why good people suffer. It's whether you are willing to become the kind of person who refuses to suffer any longer. Most people don't actually want to be good, they want to be liked. They want approval, validation, acceptance. They want people to see them as kind, generous, selfless, and in that craving for recognition, they become easy to control. They bend their values to avoid conflict. They tolerate disrespect to keep the peace. They sacrifice their needs so no one calls them selfish. But that isn't goodness. That is fear disguised as virtue. True goodness, the kind that Nietzsche respected, doesn't beg for approval. It doesn't tolerate injustice. It doesn't trade self-respect for a false sense of harmony. It stands firm, even when it makes others uncomfortable, even when it invites criticism, even when it means being alone. And that is why most good people suffer. Not because they are good, but because they are afraid to be anything else. They let guilt dictate their choices. They convince themselves that setting boundaries is cruelty. They believe that saying no makes them unkind. But real kindness isn't weakness. It isn't about making everyone happy. It isn't about being endlessly available to people who only take. Real kindness is knowing your worth so deeply that you refuse to let anyone diminish it. It's protecting your time, your energy, your soul from those who abuse it. It's having the courage to walk away from relationships that drain you, from situations that keep you small, from beliefs that demand your suffering in exchange for acceptance. The moment you stop needing to be liked, everything changes. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop feeling guilty for doing what is right for you. You stop apologizing for taking up space, for speaking your truth, for refusing to be manipulated. And suddenly, the suffering that once felt inevitable disappears, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You are no longer an easy target. You are no longer someone who can be guilt-tripped into staying in places you have outgrown. You are no longer waiting to be saved because you have become the one who saves yourself. And that is what truly terrifies people. A person who is both good and powerful, both kind and unshakable, both compassionate and completely unwilling to tolerate anything less than what they deserve. That person is free. That person is untouchable. That person is no longer controlled by guilt, by fear, by the illusion that suffering is noble. And that person is you if you are willing to let go of everything that keeps you weak. Most people never change because change requires the death of old beliefs, old habits, old identities. And that is terrifying. It's easier to stay the same, to hold on to who you were, to justify your suffering instead of destroying the version of yourself that allowed it to exist. But Nietzsche didn't believe in staying the same. He believed in becoming, in evolution, in the relentless pursuit of a higher self. And that's why most people fail. They want a better life, but they don't want to kill the parts of themselves that are addicted to suffering. They want respect, but they don't want to stop being people pleasers. They want love, but they don't want to let go of the fear that makes them settle for less. They want power, but they don't want to give up the comfort of being a victim. The truth is, suffering ends the moment you are willing to let go of the version of yourself that tolerates it. The version of you that stays silent to avoid conflict. The version of you that forgives people who aren't sorry. The version of you that believes kindness means endless self-sacrifice. That person has to die. Because as long as they exist, the suffering continues. As long as they exist, you will keep attracting the same people, the same betrayals, the same pain, over and over again, mistaking it for fate when it is really just a reflection of your own unwillingness to change. But here's the part no one tells you: when you kill the weak version of yourself, people will resist. They will call you selfish. They will say you've changed. They will try to guilt you back into the role that made them comfortable. And this is where most people fail, not because they aren't strong enough, but because they still crave approval. They still want to be seen as good. They still want permission to evolve. But no one is going to give you that permission. If you wait for it, you will be waiting forever. The only way out is to decide that you are done suffering for the sake of others, done bending to make yourself more acceptable, done living a life that is ruled by guilt instead of power. And this is the final truth: the moment you do this, the suffering stops. Not because life gets easier, not because people suddenly change, but because you are no longer someone who allows it. You don't chase love, you don't chase love. You don't justify disrespect. You don't waste time on people who drain you. You operate on a higher level, and the things that once hurt you no longer have access to you. That is what it means to be truly free. That is what it means to stop suffering. That is what it means to finally become who you were always meant to be.